like super happy that we don't know each other. So we're going to get to know each
Yeah,
other
this will be
through
fun.
this, which is really cool. So as you know, it likely just takes a minute or so. Are you in LA, Justin?
Typically, but right now I'm in Philadelphia.
Okay.
Yeah.
My
What about
coach
you?
is in Philadelphia. I'm in Toronto,
Ah, cool.
but I'm actually moving to BC very soon.
Ah,
Going to
cool.
live in the mountains. Yeah.
Is this fluorite or amethyst on your neck?
It's an amethyst.
Amethyst. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Beautiful.
All right, here we go.
Here we go.
So welcome everybody to Realign to Thrive with Facebook Live. I'm Diana Lockett, and I'm really grateful to have you here today to meet Justin. I'm going to give you a quick introduction to Justin. Justin grew up in a marginalized environment with gunshot holes outside of his bedroom window. And he transformed his life by using powerful tools, including meditation and other things that he'll talk to us about today, for his own healing, to overcome, and for self-improvement. He's an author, he's an international speaker, and he's a top 20 recording artist. And some of you who follow me on Facebook, I've been posting some of his music. Please go ahead and listen to it. My favorite song that I've been listening to lately is Believe. Justin has become a pioneering voice for diversity and inclusion in wellness. And he shares the stage with Marianne Williamson, with Deepak Chopra, and he shows others how to break free from the past and take action to create a new future. Thank you so much for being here, Justin, and welcome to my show.
Thank you, Diana. Such an honor, really, and a privilege to be here with you in this loving, sacred space that you create, this container that you're creating here online.
Yeah, thank you. I would love to hear a little bit, Justin, about how you came from this place of a marginalized environment, as you describe it, and upbringing, to where you are today. Was there an ignite moment where things shifted? How did you do that transformation? How did you essentially wake up to the potential and the possibility of your life and step into it?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I think no matter how, it's interesting when everybody reads my bio in this and how it was written, and, growing up with the home with gunshot holes outside my house and all that is very true. And I grew up in, with being in the closet as a young gay man, and also with a lot of love in my family, but just a lot of trauma. And we all have our traumas, right? Every single one of us, no matter how privileged or not, or what environment or not you grew up in, and we all learn to adapt from that conditioning. Now, some people's adaptations, I feel, look more obviously harmful to their trauma. And some of us, which I think a lot of people will relate to, adapt in ways that kind of slip under the radar and look a little bit more normal. And my kind of unique recipe of that is one that I think a lot of people will resonate with, which was becoming a chronic overachiever. Feeling like as long as I do enough, accomplish enough, be enough, then I will finally be worthy of love and of validation. And so I was the overachiever kid, and I graduated at the top of my class. I, straight A's all the way through forever, and got a full ride academic scholarship to go to UCLA. I get to LA, I come out of the closet. My life looks on the outside like I had always dreamed of. I remember being 16 and going to visit colleges and having this vision of like what my life would look like when I got out of the house and moved away. And my life, to be honest with you, looked better than that. Like, for the first time in my life, I had extra money because I had gotten like $200,000 in scholarships. And then I got a full ride to UCLA. So I had all this money and everything. And I had this moment sitting on my dorm room floor where I was struggling with an eating disorder at 18. And I looked in the mirror and I said, how is it that I've accomplished everything and I'm still miserable?
Mm.
And I think so many of us have that moment, right? Like, how is it that I've done I've been busy. I've done it all. I've manipulated and changed my external circumstances to the most dramatic opposite extreme. And I'm still not happy. And so that kind of spiraled me into a little bit of a depression, or a lot of bit of a depression, actually. And, I developed an eating disorder, which, because I think I was just trying to figure out what else, like I have to fix something else or something to control. So, for context, I am about 5'11" and I weigh 160 pounds. This is in United States numbers.
Yeah,
And
we understand that in Canada too.
great. And 160 pounds. And at the end of my freshman year of college, I weighed 115 pounds.
Mm.
So it was really extreme. And I ended up collapsing on a treadmill during finals week, and I went to therapy for the first time. And this was the changer moment. The therapist looked at me and he said, "All right, young man, you have a lot going for you. And it seems like you have only learned to find your happiness outside of yourself. And it's about time you learn to find it within." And at that moment in my life, I'm thinking, within what? Like, I've never heard this concept before, like this concept of happiness within. You have to remember, this is pre-iPhone. Oprah hadn't done, I didn't know any Black people doing any kind of meditation or mindfulness. Like, all that I knew, this was that there was this God out there that I was kind of upset with at the time, because my church had kind of disowned me after I came out of the closet. And then
It
there
was
was me.
probably a fearing God, right?
Totally, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
there was me, this person who was supposed to just make sure I was doing everything I could to not make that God mad, so that I could not go to hell,
Mhm.
And so hearing this happiness within, I'm like, this was not a concept in the hood that we, talked about, at least not back then. It's changed now quite a bit. But so I start exploring, and I'll tell you the game changer. This was the moment that like put me on the path. There's many moments, but the first big one was I went to Borders bookstore in 2006, and I went with my little UCLA hoodie because I was trying to hide, and I went and sat cross-legged on the floor in the self-help section. And I remember thinking, how the hell did I get here? Do you know what I mean? Like, I hope
Mhm.
nobody sees me.
Mhm.
I didn't know any person, any book, anything to reference. And hi, doggy. I just saw a dog in the background.
Yeah.
I see the dog just like landed right in that resonant space that
Yeah.
we're in here, just like walked in and just said, okay. So
Yeah.
I go in the bookstore, I reach out my hand like this, and I just said a prayer to, I don't even know who. I said, just please, please just help me with something. And the first book that I pulled out was A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle.
An easy read.
It, a massive read, but it
Massive read.
changed my,
Yeah.
but it changed my life, and it
Mhm.
gave me a new sense of
Mhm.
spirituality. And from that moment, I was on the spiritual path. And I still, to be honest with you, I still am one of the deepest students, even though I've been teaching now for a decade and all this kind of stuff. Like, I really am I find myself a student of transformation and personal growth. And all I'm doing is sharing what I know works with people who I feel like need it and want it. So that's it.
Thank you so much. There's so much in there to unzip. And first, I want to say, again, you are me cleverly disguised as you, because I know that narrative really well. I was a little older, I was 32, and I literally got hit with what I say was like an energetic ice pick, where someone called me the Ice Queen. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's what I'm projecting into the world. Why?
Wow.
And today I can say thank you to that Ice Queen, because she protected me from a lot of trauma and pain that I wasn't prepared to deal with yet. And similar story. I ended up at a bookstore, and it was definitely like, show me the way. What do I need to know? And my first book was The Power of Now by Eckhart
Ah,
Tolle. And I have to
wow. We
say,
love the
I
two.
resisted it. Like, it was like, oh, it was so drawn out and long at the time. Like, it took me so long to get through it. And wow, like life changing for
Yeah.
sure, for
Yeah.
sure. And I remember my first spiritual healer, who I went to for 3 months. I said, you have 3 months. I'm off work. I'm going to come see you 3 times a week. I'm going to pay $100 a time. This is back in like 2004, 2003. I said, I'm going to pay you $100 each visit. You have to fix me. There's something wrong with me. I don't know what it is, but there's an unease, there's a discomfort, a dissatisfaction. I don't know what joy feels like. I don't know what presence feels like. And now, like, thankfully he's my friend and he's forgiven me for putting that expectation on him
Wow.
because, like you, I am a deep student of life. And part of being on a human journey is a healing journey if you choose for it to be. So
Absolutely.
thank you. Your words really landed deeply within me. And I feel like I want to say thank you to your therapist for recognizing and giving, like, planting that seed in you, because that wasn't my experience with the healers that I sought and the therapist that I sought. It was still very much about going back and trying to bring back the past. And really what I needed was to value what was inside of me now,
Hmm.
the present.
Hmm. Hmm.
Amazing.
I love that. And I think I do think, because I want to be careful for people who are listening, like I do find a lot of value in bringing back the past, but in the right
Mhm.
context,
Yeah.
in the right context. And I think that you know, Casey Crown, who's a colleague of mine, she's an incredible healer and therapist. She says the past doesn't define you, but how you create meaning from your past does define you.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so powerful,
Yeah.
and it's something that I found to be very true, because once we adjust the meaning, then the way that we're living in the present really shows up. So, a big part of my work, and I'll admit, like the first, I don't know, 5, 6 years of me being in the, like, immersing myself in the spiritual community and the transformational community, I did what I think a lot of us do, which is, and I can't speak for everybody, but at least I know a lot of people who go this path, is like, we're so blown away by what is available to us on this path, that we're totally in the like love and light, 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 which is great.
Mhm.
And I recognized that my real healing came when I started to own that 50% of my work was light work and 50% of my work had to be shadow work.
Amen.
And if you're
Mhm.
not doing the shadow work with the light work, then it's like driving with your foot on the gas and on the brake at the same time,
Yeah.
or, watering a garden full of weeds and expecting roses to bloom, is what I say, in my book. So anyway, that's, that I always kind of make sure I preach that, because it's not all just kind of tiptoeing through the tulips, and just thinking positive. It's about really uncovering the things that are controlling us without us knowing it. So
Yeah. And I think that's what I believe it's Neil Donald Walsh who called it the spiritual bypass.
that's it. That's
Right?
it.
It's just wanting
Yep.
to reach for the light and to feel good. And in that comes the judgment that there are certain emotional ranges that are not good. We judge them. We've been taught to judge them.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with you. This was a past summer where I sat in deep grief. And instead of trying to numb, distract, fix, or make it different, I turned towards it. And I
That's
literally woke up every day, held it in my hand, and said, "What do you need?" Like,
mm,
literally, dear loved one, what do you need?
yeah,
And it
that's
was so incredible. And it's not done because I believe that I don't know that we ever get done, right? I think that that's just part of our being present to our life. And I love the quote that your friend Casey gave. I wrote in a contributing author in Ignite for Female Change Makers. And the quote, we use power quotes, and the power quote that I have there is kind of a refinement of that one: is our experiences do not define us. Our experiences refine us and have the potential to catapult us to our deepest purposes.
I love that so much.
And I think it's important for people to know that, as well as to know you're okay. Whatever you're going through, you're okay.
Yeah.
You're okay. And there is support and there is help. And there are practices that we can choose to turn towards that could be really helpful along the healing journey or the human journey. And I'm curious, what is it for you that turned you towards or brought you towards that a realization of not just this spiritual light, but the spiritual darkness, and that both of them are valued? How did you come to that work?
That was an interesting moment. So, like I said, for the first quite a bit, of my journey, I was just light, 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 like as much light as possible. Just bring on the light,
Me too.
and I still hold that space in some way, but now I think I've expanded my capacity to hold the shadow too. And so, one of my teachers, who's also a really good friend of mine now, her name is Sienna Sherman,
Mhm.
and I was at her house, and she had been doing a shadow work training with a guy named Robert Masters, incredible teacher. And he's actually from Canada originally, but he lives in the States now. And so I was talking to Sienna about her shadow work, and a couple of our other friends were doing it. And I was like, she was like, Justin, you should really do shadow work. Cause I was experiencing some disruption in one of my relationships. And she said, I really think you should do shadow work. And I was like, I don't want to I don't need to go back into the past. I let that go. I'm not da da da. And she said this one line that shot into my heart like an arrow, the way that you just described, your ice pick. She said, Justin, the bigger the light, the bigger the shadow it casts.
Yeah.
And I was like, something about that, like my soul recognized that as true.
Yeah.
And it just hit me and I went, oh shit. I was like, I probably have a pretty big shadow that's been building up.
And I would love to turn that around and say the bigger the shadow, the bigger the light as well,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
it's all juice. It's all our life force, and it's all part of who we are.
Yeah. Well, and what I
And
learned from Sienna, sorry, did I interrupt you? I'm sorry.
no, go ahead. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I learned from Sienna that was really beautiful is a lot of us look at shadow work or trauma work or therapy, these different things as like just going into the past and going into the darkness and these difficult, really, draining things. And while you can see it from that perspective, one of the things that Sienna told me that has been true beyond true is that doing shadow work and going into these caves, in these caverns of ourselves, and bringing our light into that space actually is guiding us towards some of the greatest jewels of our lives. And they're hidden, and we look at the mythology and the stories and the fairy tales that we've seen about like dragons, right? And so you always have like the dragon, mythologically is always kind of in the cave, like protecting the jewels, protecting the prize. And that's kind of the way that Sienna described it to me, that I love to look at it as if you look at all the stories, it's very rare that the dragon is defeated in the way that we think the dragon needs to be defeated. The dragon is defeated by befriending it. Yeah. And so we go into the shadow, not just to go in there and make a mess of our lives. We go in there because our greatest gifts are in there. Our greatest gifts are behind those demons and dragons and shadows that have controlled us. And so that, for me, once I really started to see that, like, oh, when I go in here, boom, it like unlocks even more light, that's where I started to get into that work pretty deeply.
Yeah.
How about you?
Beautiful. Yeah. I have studied for about 5 years shadow work through Heart IQ. I've trained to be one of their facilitating coaches. And what really resonated with me when I started shadow work, because I had such a shutdown, I had no relationship with anger at all. And I was a good little girl. I had your upbringing. I'm just happened to be female and maybe 20 years or so older, but the same upbringing, achieving and following the path and doing right and always being good and seen and not heard. And what I realized is when I was able to have and befriend my relationship to anger, first of all, I could release it in conscious ways so it doesn't come out in a sneaky, unconscious, unkind, uncontained way. And so that's part of my daily practice, is actually to do some shadow work around my anger, because I'm really wanting to get familiar with it as much as I can. And I recognize that the gift of anger is passion.
Yeah.
And when I remember that, my anger is just so welcomed in my world. And again, but it's about practicing it, befriending it, feeling it, expressing it, moving it. And I want to talk to you about movement, because I listened to something that you recorded recently around meditation versus movement. I do a lot of movement. My movement around grief is very slow, just following the urges of my body. And then grief opens the pathway to yearning. My movement in anger is tribal, it's heavy, it's loud. And, it's just part of my world now. And I have a 14-year-old who, it's like, Mom, are you going to yell again today? It's like, probably, like in my office with the door closed or on a call with one of my coaches, probably. Because I don't want to hold that tension inside me anymore.
Yeah.
Because that tension is blocking my life force.
That's it.
Yeah,
I share this with
I
you.
love it.
I share this with you. We do have so many threads. anger, like one of my first shadow work experiences was about unlocking my anger, because
Yeah, me too.
while most men, I think are labeled as, being overexpressive of their anger, that's definitely not been my story at all. Like I grew up in a home with domestic violence. And so like my narrative, my assessment of that was like, it's not safe to use my voice. If I'm angry, then it's going to cause incredible harm to people. So I just vowed to myself to never be one of those guys.
Mhm.
And so I kind of prided myself. It was my first shadow work session. Robert asked me, I love that we both done shadow work like this. I've been training in it too myself, and it's just so powerful. And Robert asked me, when's the last time you yelled at somebody?
Mhm.
And I went, and I like in my mind, I thought this was like, a positive thing. I was like, I mean, probably since I was a kid. Like, I don't yell at people, like I don't yell. And he was like, sit down. He was like, we have some work to do. And he was like, this under expression of your anger and spiritually bypassing your anger
Yeah.
is just as harmful as that. And so then I learned like, wow, my anger has turned into resentment because I don't
Yeah.
speak my voice, has turned
Yeah.
into passive aggressiveness, has turned
Mhm.
into anxiety,
Mhm.
and the impacts of
And
how that
probably manipulation as well.
totally all
Yeah.
those things,
Yeah.
manipulating the truth so that you don't have to be in a conflict, with people, manipulating your own truth, abandoning yourself, all these things. So what unlocked the door for me that I always love sharing with people, I ended up writing about this in Stay Woke, was which for those of you listening, that's the title of my book, Stay Woke. And so I wrote about this because the unlock point for me was understanding the difference between anger and aggression.
Mhm.
And I never even thought of these two things as different until Robert mentioned it to me. And he had told me that we oftentimes are coupling these two things, but they can be completely separate.
Mhm.
And that anger can hold, in its healthiest forms, can hold great love,
Yeah.
whereas aggression usually never holds love,
Yeah.
And so splitting that gave me like permission to. So anyway, I've been with you. I've hit the pillows and scream in my room and shake and let the energy move.
Yes, I
So,
love it. And I sometimes will call people because I have a big community of people who understand this work.
yeah.
I will call them because sometimes I feel for me, I need it to be witnessed
Mm,
because a lot of our traumas and a lot of our pains and a lot of our suppressions and repressions were done in the presence of another. So being able to express the release of it and the truth of it in the presence of another amplifies the deepness of or the depth of
I
the work.
love that. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. I love that.
Hmm.
I love that.
Hmm. So tell me a little bit about the practices that you do. And I'm specifically interested because this is something that I've been having a lot of conversations around with people around the masculine versus the feminine energy in terms of how we bring that into our own movement and expressions and practices. And I heard something that and I didn't listen to the whole thing, so I wanted to hear it for the first time in more depth here. Your experience and your beliefs around the practice of only meditation, stillness and meditation, the sitting meditation. What's your perspective on that
I
as
have a
a
couple
as a as a
perspectives.
healing modality?
Yeah, so I have a couple perspectives. So this is kind of my whole world, I mean, it's a big piece of my world. My book is on meditation, and I people often say that my book is a meditation book for people who think they would never buy a meditation book. Right? And so I love that because that's great because that was me. Like when I first started meditating, I was like, what the fuck is this? I can't stop thinking. Like, what is everyone talking about?
Yeah.
This is stupid. I'm watching the clock. But then we all pretend, right? So everybody's like, oh yeah, I meditate. It's like so great. I use Headspace. Really, we're mostly sitting there beating ourselves up in our head for 15 minutes.
Or trying not to vomit, which was my case all the
Oh
time. Like I just had these
gosh.
physical responses of wanting to vomit. I thought there was something so wrong with me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's the first I've heard that. That's amazing.
Oh,
And
yeah. That,
wow,
that was my body
I,
totally just, yeah.
wow. I can't wait to pull that thread with you a little bit more. So, because that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And actually, can we pull it a little bit now before I get
Of
too far off
course.
of it?
Of
Vomit.
course.
What made you want to vomit when you were meditating?
I think it was my resistance of being in my body.
Ah,
So I tried so hard to stay out of my mind because I had this idea that meditation meant clearing your mind completely. Now we're going back about 25 years. I started meditating, and I'm going to say I used it as a bypass.
yeah.
I,
That
I,
most
I
people
would
do.
sit for 4 or 5 hours in meditation. And
Oh,
yet that was avoiding my life.
I would throw
'Cause
up too. Shit.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so I had two experiences. I would feel like I would throw up or I would fall asleep.
Yeah.
And I had a meditation teacher say to me, well, you have two choices. Do you meditate to awaken or do you meditate to sleep? And that's such a classical perspective of meditation because sometimes I do meditate to sleep.
Yeah.
Sometimes in the middle of the night, I meditate to sleep, but I felt there was a judgment around that. So it's interesting that it still comes up for me. But the vomiting piece, I think there was a longing for me to be in my body. And there was like there was a movement into my body. And as soon as I landed there, I rejected that part of myself because
Wow.
I was so used to living in this space that
Yeah.
it didn't feel safe to be in my body. And
That's
that's what I believe was my experience. Yeah.
wow. Thank you for sharing that with me. Of
Yeah.
the out of 70 plus thousand people I've worked with, I've never heard anybody say that. And so
Mm,
that's really just such a beautiful perspective because I imagine there's a lot of people who have this experience who haven't spoken up about it. So thank you,
mhm,
Diana. It means that does a lot for
mhm.
for for me, even as a teacher, and for a lot of people listening. I think that going back to your question, there's a lot of misconceptions around meditation and mindfulness right now because we kind of throw these words around very loosely: meditation, mindfulness, this and that. And just to give people some context, meditation and mindfulness are not exactly the same thing, but we often use them interchangeably because for meditation to be brought into a lot of like public schools and government settings, they had to call it mindfulness so that people
Yes.
wouldn't think that it was this religious thing. But even though they're actually really kind of two different things in a way. So the context that I think is important for people to understand is that mindfulness is practicing the art of attention, right? And so you can like, and it's focused awareness or open awareness, but focusing your attention in some certain way. And so you could be, I joke around in my book, like you can be practicing mindfulness while you fry chicken. You could be practicing mindfulness when you do your art. You can be practicing mindfulness when you sing. And while those things might put you in a meditative like state, it's really important that we understand that those things are not meditation.
Mhm.
And people say, and I say this with great love, like people often say, well, I don't sit and meditate. Running is my meditation, biking is my meditation, dancing is my meditation. And while those things are mindful and have massive positive impacts on our lives, they're not meditation. And meditation, the reason it's different is because while mindfulness is practicing awareness and attention while doing something, meditation is practicing the art of awareness attention while the only thing that's being done is you
Mhm.
inside of your own self. There's nothing else. That sounded like oddly, that was a weird way to say that, but I think you get what I'm saying. And so
Yeah. No
the
distractions, right?
there's
It's
nothing else.
fully just you. And that's why for me, when I did that, I realized that I was so uncomfortable in my body.
And
And
that's
that's
from
what brought up that expression of needing to vomit. Yeah,
and
get
that's why so many of us have a hard time
Mhm.
because but what I always say is if we cannot be alone with ourselves, if we're not giving our souls time to speak to
Mhm.
us,
Mhm.
how on earth can we ever expect to know who we really are without having
Yeah.
to like listen to what somebody else thinks we should be? And then we wonder why our lives feel off track or why we feel stuck or why we feel this. And so for me, as it relates to movement and meditation, to really specifically answer your question, I think stillness is overrated. So you can move your body. Like nothing in the universe is still. We're not still. Even if I sit super still, I'm flying through the universe in like bajillions of miles an hour. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so nothing in the universe is still. There's this pulse. And so oftentimes for many of us, when we try to sit and meditate, we think I have to sit totally still. If I move, I'm going to mess everything up. My knee's hurting, but I don't want to move because I'm going to mess it up. I have to
I
itch, but
failed. I
I failed.
failed at meditation. Yeah.
But moving doesn't mess anything up.
Yeah.
Moving, if your body's uncomfortable, your brain can't relax. That primitive
Yeah.
system is much smarter. So I always tell people when I meditate, sometimes I pulse, sometimes I sway a little
Yeah.
bit. Sometimes my arms might move with the spanda, with the energy of my breath.
Mhm.
Sometimes I'm super what appears to be still.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's a mix. So, and people will watch when they do that. It opens up their practice because we focus so much of meditation on our minds your mind's just a part of your body. So why do we disconnect it from the body? It is a part of the body. So anyway, I can go on and on and on my soapbox about that, but I'll stop
And
there.
I can join you on that soapbox. I love that. I love that. And I love the intention of opening.
Yeah.
The intention of opening. If we all could open up to ourselves, what a different world we could live in.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
I love it. Tell us a little bit about your book now. When did it get published? How long has it been out?
2020, February 2020, just
Okay.
before lockdown.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you have a book tour planned or anything like that?
Yeah. So it
Cancel?
was
Oh,
really interesting.
yeah.
So,
yeah.
well, it actually turned out beautifully. So let me tell you. So
Okay.
my book is called Stay Woke, a meditation guide for the rest of us. And it's, again, a
Great
meditation
title.
book that is written for the rest of us. It's people who want to teach mindfulness or learn mindfulness from diverse perspectives, diverse backgrounds, a really massive way to learn how we fit this practice of meditation actually into our kind of messy modern life.
Mm.
And not how do we just use it to relax, but how do we use it to take action? How do we use this practice to inspire us to become more alive? You know, and this is the intention of the book. So it's very action oriented, but using the practice to help you hear inside what are the actions that you need to take to make a difference in your life and in our world, and for the causes you believe in and the things that you care about. And so when we put out the book, hold on, there's something that's like wanting to come through that I'm missing. Conditioning. Now, some people. And so how interesting. That was like something wants to come through, and then there's that.
There was a question in a comment, so I hit the comment on the Facebook feed.
Yeah.
And then it played, so I had to close it quickly.
Was that me talking?
That was you talking. Yeah.
What was I talking about? Do you know what that video is?
It's what you just said. It's just a 1 second delay.
Got it. Okay,
yeah,
cool.
So it's from the Facebook feed.
Got it.
And I feel like you need to stay with that, because in my own system, I'm tracking like lots of energy moving in my legs right now. So there's something that's about to come through that I'm excited to hear.
Yeah, that's what I feel. So let me just feel what that is. Okay. So I'll go here is what's asking to come through. So meditation, I talk about this in Stay Woke, and I think this is really important for people to know contextually, because it's I think it's a big missing piece of the puzzle for people. Meditation started, I'm going to give you like a 190-second history here, the quickest thing. So meditation started with a bunch of men who were monks thousands of years ago. And I know you probably know all this, Diana, but for everyone else, you know, and so to become a monk then, you had to give up your entire life. And I don't say that figuratively. If you had family, you never spoke to them again. You had to go sit in a cave or under a tree or in some kind of center of worship and devote your life to spiritual practice, often not eating for days on end, not sleeping for days on end, with nothing to drink, only every once in a while, no sex, no passion, no art, nothing.
No movement.
No movement, no movement. No, you know, there's a lot, you know, we see the images of like the, you know, tied up genitalia and, you know, all these different kinds of things. And so because what the ancient monks believed was that anything that was happening in this and from this physical body, any thought, any emotion, any sensation was a distraction from the ultimate purpose, which was being connected with the divine. So what the ancient monks had to create was a super special practice, a technique, a tool that would help them castrate themselves, literally, from their bodies, that would help them disconnect from all of their worldly desires. And so it's this kind of snipping, the emotional, mental, physical connection. That practice was meditation. And so this is really important context, right? Because what happens is there's this practice that was primarily created as a practice of disconnection for people who were sitting in caves and devoting their life to practice. Great, that is a perfect purpose for them. So then you have Westerners, colonization, the whole thing. We learn about these practices and then we bring them West. We're not monks. Right? We're first world people with problems and to-do lists and iPhones and kids.
And bills to pay.
Bills and passions. And what I believe we really want and correct me if I'm wrong about this, Diana, is we want to actually be more connected to our lives, right? We want to be more connected to our bodies, more connected to our emotions and the causes we care about and things that we believe in, not disconnected. And so there's kind of what happened when everything came west is there became two pathways of meditation. And one pathway is what's called monastic meditation. Now, I want to be very clear here as I'm speaking. I, in no way, shape, or form, am here trying to dictate to anybody what style of meditation works for them. Okay. I'm just giving you an observation from working with thousands and thousands of people in over 40 countries and doing a lot of historical research on this. So there's monastic meditation. Monastic meditation meaning meditation that derives from monks. And there's nothing wrong with it. But for most of us, when we try to do that practice, many of us, it feels like we're trying to do something that we can never actually accomplish. We're trying to get our mind to stop thinking. We're trying to disconnect from our bodies. And it creates this sense of dis-ease inside of ourselves because that's not actually what we really want. We just think that we're supposed to want it. The other pathway of meditation is meditation and mindfulness practices that utilize both focused awareness and open awareness, where we're welcoming our emotions, welcoming our thoughts, welcoming our sensations with compassion and great love, the way that you described your grieving practice, you know? And this type of meditation is what a lot of the studies have been done on at universities and this and that, you know, that say that it has all these benefits, but we kind of lump them all together. And then it feels confusing because it's like, well, I'm supposed to welcome my thoughts, but I'm also supposed to stop thinking. What does that mean? You know what I mean? Like, how does that work? So I give people that frame very importantly, because getting on the right pathway and finding the right style of meditation is how you transform from being somebody who tries to meditate into somebody who actually meditates and that feels good. And so my intention with Stay Woke is to help people learn how to find that exact right recipe of a practice for them. I never, at 1 second through the whole book, there's never one instance where I say, this is what you should do or have to do or should feel. I say, here are the ingredients and here are the right questions to ask yourself.
Love it.
Let's make the perfect meal for you.
Love it. That's amazing.
So anyway,
And
that was what was.
that's your book. And that's what needed to come through. And I have to tell you, my body is fully relaxed now. So I'm so glad you gave voice to that. I have a yoga teacher training academy, and I studied under a lot of the same people that Sienna studied under. So
Amazing.
Anusara is my background.
Great.
And in the Anusara, we bring in the tantric philosophy versus classical philosophy. And so the belief in classical philosophy is very similar to the monastic meditation, where our bodies are a problem.
Yeah.
And we need to transcend the body and turn away from the desires, turn away from the ego. And versus in Tantra, we believe that our desires are our embodied gift.
Yeah.
And our body is the vessel by which we get to express that gift into the world. And so I love this conversation because it's everything that I believe and I teach and I breathe. And so in that context, there's no right, there's no wrong. It's really, you have the freedom. We are free beings seeking boundaries, not bound beings seeking freedom. And when we take that perspective and we recognize that freedom is simply releasing the conditions that have been placed upon us, then life is easy. Life is a playground, but we make it so hard.
I would love for you to pull that thread a little bit more, unzip that. We are free beings seeking boundaries, not bound beings seeking freedom. Why are we seeking boundaries? What do you mean by that?
Seeking boundaries is the conditions that we get to create. And I say get, not that we should, but we get to create to feel safe in the world. Right.
Okay.
So I have a belief that my love for a partner could be unconditional, but I might have conditions on who I choose to let into my life.
Right.
Right. So that's my boundaries is sort of what I use to define that.
Beautiful. Thank
So
you.
we are free beings seeking boundaries, and we need boundaries to stay safe. I mean, if we didn't have boundaries, everyone would be driving 170, let's put it in your language, 170 miles per hour on the highways and not honoring anything. And so we do need boundaries as humans, but we are free. We have the freedom to create anything we want. So I'm moving in 3 months across Canada. It took me 56 years to realize that I have the freedom to make that choice. I
Mhm.
always did, but I didn't recognize it.
Yeah.
It was like it was literally like um it was in me, and it was starting to like permeate and start and move something in me that was waking up to that. And then it's like, I can do this. There's no
Yeah.
reason why I can't do this.
Yeah.
I love this
Cool.
conversation, Justin. I could go on and on and on, and I think we're going to have to chat some more because there's just such a strong resonance in my heart for what you're
Uh,
speaking about.
can I
I would,
can I tell you what happened before we go on? Because I think you'll love this with the book
yeah,
tour.
yeah, yes,
So
please,
my book comes out February 11th of 2020.
yeah,
We had planned this incredible book tour, 7 months long, ending in Europe, where instead of going to bookstores, we were going to high schools and colleges in underprivileged neighborhoods all around the country,
amazing.
giving the books away to the kids for free as a
Yeah,
surprise, and then doing evening events for the communities at night. It was like we planned these big kind of like TED Talk music concert style events to really like get the kids in. We did 3 schools,
I have goosebumps.
yeah, several thousand students, and then COVID.
Yeah,
So what was really fascinating was, the first few months, it was like, whoa, it was such a huge shock. I was on the road, like literally between stops when everything got
yeah,
canceled. And
yeah.
so I go home to LA, shelter in place. We pause for a few months. And then I finally had this moment. I said, what am I waiting for? The kids need this more now than they ever did before.
Yeah.
So we pivoted virtually, and we've already reached double the amount of kids that we would have reached in person if we didn't do it virtual. And so for anybody listening, we're in a really cool position because we raised about $250,000 to go to schools. And obviously that budget stretches a lot further when there's no travel and all that kind of stuff. So
Mhm.
for anybody who has high schools or college students who you think could benefit from learning these practices in a way that's really exciting, it's like we do a big virtual assembly. Just reach out to me. You can go to justinmichaelwilliams.com, and we're in a great position as a nonprofit. We're looking to spend our money to go to
Amazing,
schools. So if anybody
amazing.
has high schools or colleges anywhere in the world, we've done about 40 of them. We can continue to do more. So,
So you don't know this about me, Justin, but I've worked for 32 years as a speech and language pathologist in the school system. So I have a
ta-da,
lot of connections in schools. So
ta-da.
I'm going to find the right people to speak to,
Thank you.
superintendent level, where
Thank
they
you,
can bring it in.
Diana.
That's amazing. And is there anything you want to tell us about your music?
Oh gosh, I mean, there's so much to say about that. People often ask me this question and say, are you a musician? Are you an author? What are you? Like, I don't get it. Are you a meditation teacher? What are you? And it's so funny when people do that, because I think it's really hard to kind of define ourselves in this noun like form. And I often just like to talk about what I do more as a verb.
Mhm.
And, like I am here to help people break past their limiting beliefs and step into the lives that they thought were impossible for themselves. And I do that sometimes through mindfulness, through writing, through speaking to you right now, and through music. And so my music, the reason I use music in all of my work is because music for all of human history up until recently has never just really been for entertainment. It's always been for transformation. It's always been how we turn suffering and pain into beauty and art and move through things. And for a lot of the communities that I work in, where, the education levels may not be that high, coming up with like a really well-planned TED Talk is not going to be the way into their hearts.
Mhm.
And so I use music to get people to feel, because it's when they feel that they feel inspired to make a change. So yeah, I have a new song that just came out called Believe. We
It's on my grief playlist.
Oh, that's a
But
yeah.
it's near the end of the playlist because I have to move through that journey and to get there. And it's the journey of inspiration and hope and transformation. And I love it. So
Oh,
everyone listening, go and download that song, Believe. It's amazing. Thank you. Keep going.
thank you. Yeah, the words to the chorus are really special to me. It's, would you believe all this happened to me? Would you believe all this happened to me? But I'm still not broken. No, 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 they can't bring us. No, 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 they can't take us down. Would you believe all this happened to me, but I'm still not broken? And it goes on and on. I didn't realize when my whole world ended overnight that you were right there guiding me, pushing me to go stronger. I
I'm
pray that
getting
I can
very
go stronger
teary-eyed,
now.
just so you know, I'm getting
And
very teary-eyed.
and but that's like, it's
Yeah.
this energy of what I think our spirituality constantly tries to teach us,
Yeah.
is that, it's always there. It's always right there guiding me. It's right there.
Yeah.
And it's always pushing us to grow stronger, even when we're going through challenges.
Yeah.
So
And our journey and our job is to continue to wake up or to stay woke, right? To remember, to remember. I always say for the practice of yoga that I teach, which is really a personal development program disguised as yoga,
yeah, I
it's the
love that.
practice, it's the practice of remembrance. There is
Mm,
nothing in you that needs to transform. There's a revelation and a remembrance that's required, or that's an opportunity to get touched. And then when you do, it does transform the world, and it transformed the world by transforming your life. But do you know Sean Corn?
of course, yeah.
Yeah. So I've done some retreats with Sean and gotten to know her well. And she has her book called The Evolution is the Revolution.
Yeah.
And I say the revelation. And here we go. I've got a book and I've been really toying with the title, but it's coming to me now. The revelation is the transformation.
Mm,
Right. And it's just when we can remember who we are and who we are to each other and why we're here, and take away the struggle that we use to hold us, for the struggle of everything that's happened to define us, when we can let go of that and just remember. And it's not just me, but it's you and it's everybody, as a God realization.
yeah.
And that hurt people. And there's a practice of forgiveness that's required, but we are all essentially golden. We are
Yeah.
all essentially goodness. When we can remember that, that's the transformation that gets to happen in the world. And
Mm.
I know that that's a path that you're on. And I just want to take a breath with you, because I am in your presence right now. I feel so inspired.
Oh, I
Yeah.
do too. And that is definitely your book title, by the way. That was amazing. I hope
I
you
didn't
got.
write it down.
Yeah, well, we're recording this, so you're
We're
gonna.
recording.
The
I'm going to go back and listen.
the
The
revolution.
revelation is the transformation.
That's it. That's
Yeah.
it. And
It
we
was
also.
going to be the gold is in the darkness. That was what at one
Mm,
point. But I'm not only writing about shadows.
yeah.
So I think the revelation is the transformation. Thank you.
That's an amazing. That's, I can see it. I feel like that's it, or at least that's like leading you closer to it. But
Yeah.
that feels like it in a way. And you said something that really resonated with me, because I feel the same way about meditation. Like, my work is a transformational experience and program disguised as meditation. That's really
Yeah.
what it is. I use meditation as a tool to
Yeah.
help people go through a bigger transformational process. And so I love that language that you just
Mm,
said, because
mm.
it's beautiful. And I'm going to use that in some ways. So
Absolutely.
that's amazing. That's
Love
amazing.
it. I want to give you an opportunity to speak about the program that you have coming up soon. I received the email and I looked into that, and I'd love for you to share that with the audience. It's not just people that are here live, but it's going to be posted on YouTube. It's going to be posted on Facebook. So I'd love to give
Yeah.
you an opportunity to speak to that.
So a big part of my work is uniting people across what are perceived as divides. And we have this interesting concept in the spiritual community that is, I think, spiritual bypass, where we have this concept and this virtue that we're all trying to lead into, called oneness. Oneness, oneness, oneness. And I actually don't think oneness is the highest virtue that we should be aiming to. Like, yes, we know. Yes, for sure, true, verifiable. Like, we all come from the same stardust. There is just one human race. I believe all of those things. And the actual experience here on this physical planet is very differentiated, and that's not a bad thing. I think what we should be valuing more, in my opinion, than oneness is intimacy.
Mhm.
And you cannot be intimate with something you're one with. There has
Mhm.
to be at least some little separation to be intimate with something. And this, when we go into our talk about spirituality, isn't this what we say the universe even came into form for? To
Mhm.
differentiate itself, to have an experience of itself. And
Mhm.
so as we lean into that, and the reason I name that is I have a program called the Liberation Experience. And it's a program that, I'll say it this way, there are lots of conversations about change, very few conversations that actually change something.
Mhm.
There's a lot of conversations about divides, about race, about coming together. Very few moments that actually give us a chance to do that. And so the liberation experience, I use this metaphor of You can't learn how to swim by reading about swimming. You can read about it as much as you want. You can't learn about scuba diving, by reading about it. You can't learn to scuba dive by reading about it, rather. You have to jump in the ocean. You have to jump in the pool. This program is the pool. We bring people together across divides. We're training people not to talk about race or racism. We're bringing people together to actually create intimacy and connection and uniting us. And so it's an 8-week program, totally online. We meet twice a week. It is with small team groups outside. It's so beautiful, the community, and we have full scholarships for anybody who needs it. And if you're watching this after the program starts, just go to the website and you can get on the wait list for the next one. But we have a program coming up in about 10 days starting. So the website is liberationx.org, liberationx.org.
We'll make sure to put all your links in the comments.
Thank you. And even if you can't participate or you don't have time, it's all run through my 501c3, a nonprofit organization. So if you donate to help give a scholarship to somebody in need, because we have many people who need scholarships, 100% of your donation is tax deductible and every dollar counts. So there's ways that you can get involved and contribute, even if you can't participate for the 8 weeks.
Amazing.
You're wonderful.
You're
Diana.
wonderful. Oh my gosh.
What a
Okay, first of all,
joy.
let me receive that.
Mm,
There's this yeah, a defensive strategy, right, of putting
right.
it back on you, but
You're
I do
wonderful. You're
want
wonderful. No, you're
to
wonderful.
thank
So
you.
great again. I'm
Thank
so
you.
grateful to be in your presence. I got on this call in an interesting space because I had saw a video online that was a little bit traumatic to watch. And
Mhm.
I feel like completely held and wrapped and loved in this
Mm,
space that you've created. So I'm grateful.
Thank you. And thank you for making the time, for coming on here, for being willing to get to know me and my world when we had never met before. And Iris has been watching this and she says hello, just so you know. Uh, I watched, for the audience, I watched Justin. He participated in an online summit that I participated in. And as soon as I saw his talk, I reached out knowing nothing about Justin. I just sent him an email, said, would you like to come on my show? We need to meet. We need to talk. And I'm so grateful that you said yes. Um, I feel like this is just the beginning, and I'm excited to see where you take your journey. And I'm excited to see where our journeys might coincide again. So thank
You
you very
too, my
much.
dear. And if you need any help with that book, let me know because I can
Ah,
plug you into some spaces to help get that
okay.
out to the world.
Perfect. Thank you. So
Okay.
hold on here. Stay with me for a minute. We're going to
Yeah.
say goodbye to the live stream and have a wonderful weekend. And thank you to everybody who is watching this now or watching it later. You are so incredibly held and loved, and I'm grateful for all of you. Thank you. Thank you, Justin.
Mwah.